This is our last episode of season 2
Oh,
of the
awesome.
Canon.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I'm happy to have you guys on for that. Where this episode is dropping the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Some people know as Black Wednesday or Blackout Wednesday. I think that's what like college kids call it when they are partying the night before Thanksgiving. You know, Thanksgiving Eve and all
That's
that stuff.
charming.
But
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
once upon a time we were there.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, this is our last episode of season 2. We're going to be taking an extended break for the holidays, so we'll be off from Thanksgiving through the new year, and then back in 2024 with more episodes of the show. But before we get to that little break, we do have one more movie to talk about. Listener, we're talking today about Shawshank Redemption. I am joined by Brandon and Andrew of the Namely 90s podcast. You can tell by the name of the podcast why I thought that these guys would be great to bring on to talk about this movie in particular. We'll obviously get into all of that. We'll get into the show. But before we do all that, I just have to ask, because it's been a while since we've all, chatted on air before. So Brandon, Andrew, how are you guys doing? How's it going?
Pretty good. It's been a minute, Raph. We're still going over at Namely 90s, which is, as you hinted at, is a 90s podcast, 90s nostalgia podcast that we've been doing since 2021?
May 2020.
Wow. We're on episode 178, 79 at this point, and not including our Christmas specials that we do. 12 episodes from the 21st to the 1st of the new year, which is how we met you. You were on, wow, what episode did we bring you on for? Do you remember?
It must have been 2020. It was the Mr. Hanky episode of South Park.
Oh yeah.
Such a good episode.
A classic.
And we're planning on bringing you back again this year to talk
Hell
about. Well, I have the 2022
yes,
Christmas
we are.
specials
When is
up.
that? These come at me rapidly. Are we doing that? That's cool. I'm glad to have a return guest.
Yes, that's the 26th recording.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that we haven't figured out the time for yet, but probably should at some point.
We'll get there.
Yeah, and we were doing the Martin episode, right?
Yeah,
looking forward to that. But yeah, hi, I'm talking everything Namely 90s. Andrew's my co-host, but this is
hi
how
there.
It normally happens.
Well, we moved into season 2, so we changed our format.
That's right.
We used to do a month and a year in the 90s, and there were exactly 120 months and years in the 90s. So we did that, and now we've moved on to kind of alternating between variety shows on topics we want to cover, and then also deep dives on topics that we wanted to go into more detail on, with the occasional special intermixed.
Love it. It's a great show.
Thank you.
Canon listeners, if you don't already subscribe to Namely 90s, definitely go over to all their pages, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all that good stuff, and smash the subscribe button for Brandon and Andrew. It is a really, really fun show. Some really fun topics. Have you guys talked about this movie in any capacity on that show as of yet?
Ooh.
So back in the season 1 format where we did talk about a month out of the year, a lot of stuff we talk about would be like what TV shows premiered that month and what or ended, and what was in the box office. So we did on our 20th episode, which was the September 1994 episode, we talked about Shawshank, we talked about Friends, and we talked about just generic reboots, I guess.
We were kind of on a reboot kick back then.
Yeah, we had a whole reboot alarm. It was It was the thing that, because Andrew didn't want to talk about the next Karate Kid, so we had to do Shawshank.
Yeah, which I mean, back then we didn't talk about things in any great depth,
right?
Because there was so much that would happen in any given month. But no, I don't think we covered it in any great detail. So this is a good opportunity.
Yeah,
Sweet.
and
yeah,
like Andrew was saying, we would cover 3 topics per episode, so at most we would dedicate maybe 10 minutes to it, which means I wouldn't be able to force Andrew to watch anything as hard as I tried. But at least coming on this show, I've finally been able to make him watch something that I consider a classic.
Yeah, I've watched more stuff. Like that's one thing this has done for me, because I'm one of those people who has not seen a lot of the sort of classic or cult classic movies that are out there. And what's funny is they're always really good. Imagine that. But I've watched a lot of content that ended up being much better than I expected, and a lot of content that was worse than I ever imagined.
It's mostly because he has
this movie.
Yeah, it's mostly because he just has this like anti-authoritarianism thing where like if someone tells him that you got to check out this movie, it's fantastic, it's like one of the all-time greats, he'll be like, yeah, I have a box set of 24 to go watch.
That's so mainstream. That's me. Yeah. I'm like, that's so mainstream.
This movie is about as mainstream as it gets, but I think with good reason. I hope, Andrew, that for you watching this movie, it fell more in the category of, everyone says it's a classic, and you were like, oh yeah, it kind of is, more so than part of the content that you watch that ends up being worse than you could ever imagine something being.
Yeah, I mean, generally they're like bad rom-coms that we're watching ironically or something like that,
Oh, on our show, yeah, because that's the only thing I could get him to watch. Like, especially last year when we were transitioning to finish the last of like the 12 months, because we wanted to do like a clean break. So we started the new format at the beginning of this year. So last year we had a whole bunch of specials, like one per month, where we'd either watch a movie from themed to that month. Like we watched She's All That, which I'd never seen before, and I liked.
Great
and then
movie.
I think we watched Rami and Michelle's high school reunion, which
also a great movie.
Don't forget Gremlins 2, which I actually found hysterical. I was I was really resistant to watching that, but that was a good one. Of course, the classics, Independence Day for the 4th. I think we did Jurassic Park on its anniversary or something like that. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Nice. And now I can't get him to watch Gremlins, which I think is the better of the 2 movies, personally. But it's also not within the purview of the 90s for us. So
that is true. We try to be fairly true to the 90s thing when we can. Although, I mean, a lot of our childhood was in the early 2000s also, so sometimes that line gets muddled a little bit in my brain anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think we're like all around the same age, but I feel like there's like a certain group of 90s babies who are 90s babies and not really 90s kids, but we consider ourselves 90s kids. But then when we think about the things that would make us 90s kids, we're really early aughts kids. And like all the things that we're remembering as being super 90s are like from like 2000 to like 2004.
Yep.
Yeah, I think for us, like, to be fair, our childhood was in the 90s, but our adolescence and whatnot was in the early 2000s. So it's hard to sometimes separate those two areas because my memory sucks.
But it's like I said, it's a great show. It like really hits for all the 90s nostalgia, which again, if you're of a certain age, like later stage, or maybe not even later stage, just all millennials like have fond memories of the 90s. So if you fall into that bucket, like it's definitely worth checking out. Even some younger people, who didn't necessarily grow up or like ever experience the 90s still have like a fond perception of the 90s just because of like what it meant for pop culture and stuff. So
for those people, it's more of a cautionary tale. Like, let's study the past so we're not doomed to repeat it.
Although I feel like a lot of 90s fashion is coming back. Mm-hmm. Like 90s fashion is big amongst Gen Zers and stuff,
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with that.
like Jenko jeans and like Blink is like all of a sudden like the biggest band in the world, and
they just
kids
released
love
another
them.
album.
Yeah, it's insane. I always thought that people liked. We're getting like super deep into the 90s now, but I always thought people liked Blink 182 as just like kind of a not tongue in cheek, but you know, everyone knows the 5 big Blink songs and that's about it. No one's like really a Blink 182 fan. And now all of a sudden everyone is a massive Blink 182 fan. I don't get
I
it.
think
but
they're
like,
doing the tour is sponsored by
having fun.
AARP. You know, that's like when they joke and they make these records.
Well, I mean, they are Gen X, but they came out at a time when we were going from our childhood into
like middle school,
teenage
right?
years. Yeah, so like that early 2000s Blink hits the feels for me. So I did an entire deep dive on them for last month for their album drop. So
by you, do you mean me?
Oh, you did? Yes, I was going to do it, and then you took it from me without telling me until the day of.
The thing that scares me about all these bands and stuff, like releasing new music, is like how old they are and how much time has passed. It's a little alarming. It's causing a bit of an existential crisis here.
Yeah. Hey, I gotta say that new Blink album, it's not half bad. I like maybe a quarter of the songs.
It's not half bad. It's just 3/4 bad.
People like it, man. People like it. You know what? I'm not going to ask the question because then we will fully just dive into like 90s bands.
We could do that on our show.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have the time for that for this episode. We do have a movie to get to that does not involve any 90s bands, but it is a great movie from the 90s. I feel like some people would maybe say it's the best movie from the 90s. It's like, it is very of the time, and you know, it occupies like a very distinct place within movie history and like pop culture history. So I think it'll be really fun for us to get into it and like especially approach it from that angle, as opposed to just like breaking down like what it is about the Shawshank Redemption that makes it such a good movie, because to be quite frank, there are like so many other texts out there that do that already, whether it be articles, other podcasts, video essays, all that good stuff. So today we're gonna try to approach it from specifically the 90s angle. But in order for us to start the conversation about Shawshank Redemption, I was wondering if, Andrew, we'll start with you. If you remember, well, I take that back. Brandon, we're going to start with you. Do you remember your first time watching this movie, your first time seeing it? I know for me, it's like a very specific kind of viewing, but I'm curious to hear like your initial interactions with this movie.
All right, listeners, don't hate me. But as you may know, TNT bought the rights to air this movie on cable all the way back in 1997. So the first time I saw this movie, I was probably somewhere between 8 and 10, and it was most likely a Saturday afternoon. And it just happened to be on TV. My dad was watching it, and I was probably half playing Solar Striker on the Game Boy or Pokemon or something, and then suddenly got captivated by Morgan Freeman's voice and eventually a man crawling through feces to freedom. So I don't have a specific moment, but I've watched this movie so many times, just catching it on reruns on television. Oh, not reruns, but cable TV. But I don't know if I've ever like sat down and watched it front to back in like a serious viewing capacity until the viewing for today. So it was definitely like, I knew all the moments. Like, I've watched it from beginning to end on cable television, but like, even because I had DVR'd the episode or the movie off of TNT, because it's gonna play way back when Raph told us about it, and then I started watching it and I'm like, This is like already 15 minutes into the movie when they started it. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go back and buy it off of Amazon and watch it from the beginning, because they cut out all, like, the beginning of the movie to like, it started with Morgan Freeman going, "When I met Andy Dufresne," like that scene. I was like, there's a whole, like, trial murder thing.
Do you think it was a glitch, or do you think they were just like, this first part really doesn't seem that material, let's just move on, let's just skip it?
I don't know, because like, it recorded the 3-hour block that it was on for, and it's a 2 hour 20-minute movie, so like they must have cut some stuff out to try to fit it. But
well,
also,
theoretically, you don't need the first part of the movie. Like, it's some background, but they provide enough information with flashbacks and kind of like that narrative that like, if you're at the TNT studios and trying to figure out what to cut out, like, you could cut out the beginning. I mean, that's sort of sacrilege, but you could.
And now that there's more commercials now than there was back in the 90s, they've had to slowly cut more things out over the years. But yes, my initial viewing experience was watching it on TNT. I apologize to all of you listening out there.
Don't apologize at all. I've been chuckling all throughout your response, because the viewing on TNT is how I assume most people first watched this movie. I feel like this is a movie that can only be watched on cable television, where you're missing parts of it, and the first time you see it, you maybe miss the first 30 minutes because that was when you just started flipping through the channels. So I was laughing because I feel like your first viewing experience is like essentially the universal first viewing experience, or just like general relationship that most audience members have to this movie, including myself. Like, I don't think I've ever seen this movie without commercial breaks.
Okay,
like,
good.
I don't think that's ever happened for me.
I feel better now. I feel better.
Even for this viewing, I think I watched it through my cable provider, so like there were commercial breaks. Otherwise, it would just feel weird. But Andrew, as someone who had not seen this movie before,
I was going to say, I can remember it like it was yesterday, because, well, it was. No, the thing that's happened to me is, because I haven't seen a lot of these like classic movies, is I understand references to these movies from Family Guy, because Seth MacFarlane loves to reference these sorts of movies, but I've never actually seen them. Like, the first time I saw, for example, The Wizard of Oz, like, so many things clicked for me from that show. So, like, my biggest exposure to this movie was the episode in, I think, season 7 of Family Guy, where they do 3 Stephen King stories, and they do this one. And that's really all I know of this movie. So watching it last night was kind of interesting. I think it's kind of fun for someone who's literally never seen it before to like have to say what their first reaction to it was. That'll be interesting.
So what was your first reaction to it? I can't believe that a millennial, someone who is a child of the 90s, who I assume grew up in the same America that Brandon and I grew up in, where this movie was on every weekend on TNT, and you literally could not escape it unless you were like actively trying.
I mean, we had cable.
This man lived right down the road from me, by the way.
No, I grew up in Soviet Russia. You can tell him that.
Oh, you're the replacement. No. That makes sense.
Yeah, I have a secret phrase that will trigger me. No, it's
a Russian sleeper agent.
I grew up here in the good old U.S. of A., and we certainly had those channels. I don't know. I had a short attention span. I don't see this for me as a kid like pulling me in, because like now I enjoy movies because I can actually understand them and like kind of try to figure out what's going on. But back then I was just oblivious.
You weren't captivated by Morgan Freeman's voice. It's like, frankly, it's impressive that you somehow avoided this movie, like in its totality. Like, you haven't even seen like a scene from it except for
no, except through Family Guy, which is a really sad state of affairs.
That's insane.
I also want to say that Morgan Freeman has been 70 for 40 years, hasn't he?
That's true.
That's the secret to aging. You just look like you're old when you're 30. So if you look 50 when you're 30, then it just seems like you're aging well. So he's looked the same since 94.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, like they do subtly do aging like makeup for like him and Tim Robbins in this movie, but it's like, oh, they've slightly changed their hair.
Yeah, in the last 16 years. No, it was 10 years, right? Or I forget. Yeah. But
and Morgan Freeman's like hair was slightly more gray than it started, but I was just like, I've never noticed that until this watch through film.
I mean, I my experience was diluted a little bit because I had to watch the commercials on Tubi. But one of the things I enjoyed about it was seeing some of these actors. I'm like, oh, I recognize this person. Like, what are they in? What are they in? Like, Clancy Brown. One of my favorite shows is ER, and Clancy Brown plays like a doctor / love interest on that show. And Paul McCrane, who plays one of like the smaller parts of the guards, plays someone on that show. Like the wardens, and I know him from 24, so it's kind of fun to see these different people like before they're super famous.
Clancy Brown, the voice of Mr. Krabs on SpongeBob SquarePants.
Yeah, but to annoy Brandon, I was like, I didn't know Murphy Brown was in this, and I said I didn't know Tony Robbins was in this.
And that one got me. I was like, it took me a second to register. He said Tony instead of Tim.
I have to ask, who does Tim Robbins remind you of? Like, he reminds me of a cross of several people. Who are those people, do you think?
Wow.
If you would have asked, if I would have had time to prep, I would have answers for you, because I've thought the same thing.
Okay.
I'm drawing blanks. I can't.
For some reason, he kind of reminded me of like a Bill Paxton to some degree, and like a young William H. Macy. I don't know. I was just getting like, because I've never really seen him in other stuff.
He's tall,
but he's famous.
He is very tall.
Those are the two names that came to mind. But and a little bit of Sam Neill in a way. That was the other thing I was picking up.
I think it's when they're like.
I love how 90s your references are.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
Speaking of Tim Robbins being tall, this is a totally weird trivia nugget, but I don't know if either of you guys knew this, but when the movie was like first pitched, the person who they wanted to play Andy Dufresne, they were originally aiming for Tom Cruise. Which
I was gonna say Andy Dick, but no, just kidding.
Both would be very different movies. I feel like the Andy Dick version would work a little bit more than the Tom Cruise version, but I think Tom Cruise in this role would not work,
except for the hair.
Well, because I was getting this confused with The Green Mile, because apparently all prison movies are the same thing in my mind. Tom Hanks could have pulled it off.
I think Tom Hanks was another person that they were going for. So Tom Cruise was the top choice, and then it was a mix between, I want to say, Tom Hanks and like Kevin Costner and one other super 90s name. I think it's just because you said Bill Paxton, but I want to say Bill Pullman. Bill Pullman could have pulled this off.
I don't see Costner on this one. I just don't see him in this role.
No, he's too suave. There's like, Tim Robbins. It's how lanky he is and the sadness in his eyes, like the empty, dead sort of eyes that he can do. That I don't think like Tom Cruise would have been too wacky and too short. Costner would be like too suave.
Yeah, Tom Cruise could have got through that hole easier.
Yeah, true.
It just doesn't work the same. Like someone crawling through miles and miles of shit to then come out the other side clean. It needs to be a lanky guy. If it's like short and stocky Tom Cruise, it just, and I'm like #1 Tom Cruise defender, but this movie doesn't work with him. It also doesn't work with anyone other than Morgan Freeman, if we're being frank.
True.
If I remember correctly, that trivia nugget, it was supposed to be a Rob Reiner flick, wasn't it? When they were thinking of casting Tom Cruise, and then Harrison Ford was going to be the Morgan Freeman character.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
which
Harrison Ford could maybe work, but I don't know.
He had that I look old now in the 90s look, because as I've been complaining to Andrew about for like the Tom Ryan or Jack Ryan films, Tom Clancy, Jack Ryan films with Harrison Ford in them. It's just like he looks too old at this point. Like, I like Harrison Ford when he's young and Indiana Jones or Han Solo-y or that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like he's old enough to be the director, but he's like just an analyst. You know, you're like, well, why?
Yeah,
shouldn't you have been promoted by now?
Harrison Ford's a funny one because he jumped really quickly from young and hot to looking old for 40 years.
Yes. But like, it has the similar Morgan Freeman thing there, though. He could have played old and wise friend to protagonist in this.
Yeah,
possibly. But you're right. Morgan Freeman is the only person. After watching the performance, you're like, no. Why would you even consider anyone else for either role?
Yeah, and hearing the voiceover, like no one else could deliver that voiceover the way that he does.
Agreed.
Which is why it's a great like Sunday afternoon movie to just have on in the background while you're like in and out of naps. It's the only way to watch it, really.
Because the movie will outlast your nap for sure if it's on television.
Yeah, you'll wake up and you'll be like, "Oh, they're having beers on the roof. That's cool." And then you fall back asleep for a little bit, and then you wake up and you're like, "Oh, he's laundering money for the warden." And then you fall back asleep and you wake up, he's crawling through the shit. And he's gonna get it out, It's it's great. But Andrew, I want to circle back to how you responded to it as a first-time viewer of this movie in the year of our Lord and Savior 2023, as a millennial who somehow missed this movie over the last 30 years.
Well, I'm notoriously hard to please. I was joking with Brandon. I was like, I'm formulating my hot take. And he says, they said no hot takes. And I was like, exactly. No, I don't normally love period pieces either. I don't know what that is. It's just like not my favorite thing. Although I think I'm getting more into them because I really liked Oppenheimer too. I genuinely wanted to watch the movie. Like, there was a commercial break, which is not, like good when you're watching a movie, but I had no intention in those commercial breaks of not watching, like, to see what happened next. Like, it was good. And actually the way they spaced the breaks was such that, like, it was usually at spots where like the movie kind of progressed. So it was a long movie, but it did not lose my attention. And the score was fairly epic. I really liked that. The acting was good. I mean, I actually love this movie.
I'm shocked. I mean, I'm not shocked that you I'm not shocked that you liked it. I'm just like shocked that you're admitting that you like it.
Yeah, no, it was good. I don't have any notes like as far as the quality of the movie.
Sweet. I love that. Well, as you guys know, here on the Canon, our whole intention is to celebrate movies, celebrate, what makes movies great. And this is a movie that is like universally loved. So Andrew, I am happy to hear that you do actually, enjoy this movie. You don't have any notes for it. I feel like this is a movie that, because it is so universally loved, it then sort of falls into the trapping of like, well, it's so mainstream that it then becomes cool to be the person who's like, Shawshank Redemption's kind of overrated. But then every time you watch it, or, if you watch it for the first time, we all are in agreement. No, this movie is pretty rad.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like the biggest person to call something overrated. And I don't know, like,
very true.
It transports you there. You begin to sort of root for the characters, or even maybe identify with him. Not that I've ever done time personally, but it kind of brings you in. And I don't know, I think seeing it without a lot of the context, and like, honestly, I didn't know people universally loved this movie or thought that it was too mainstream. I just watched a movie and it was good. So I mean, that's just kind of a pure reaction.
I did try my best to leave any like this is like on the list of 100 best films of all time or stuff when I said, "Hey, let's watch Shawshank."
Just
I forget.
Go out and watch it without any of that extra baggage. Brandon, I'm going to kick this question over to you first.
All right.
Are you a big Stephen King guy? Like, do you read him a lot? Are you a fan of like the film adaptations? Does that sort of like color how you watch this movie, or are you just like a Shawshank guy?
You know, I am not the biggest Stephen King reader. I don't like horror. So like a lot of his books tend to skew that way, and that's what I think of when I think of Stephen King. I guess this was like a light novella, which I probably would have been interested in when I was a hoity-toity 20-something, trying to read like Salinger and Emerson and Kerouac and stuff like that. But I never got around to it because I just thought, oh, he's like the horror guy. Like, although like I also knew this, like Stand By Me was adapted from one of his books too, which I recall liking as a kid. I like Will Wheaton, I like Jerry O'Connell. They grew up to be decent actors. I've never seen Misery, and then The Shining, or The Shining, as most people call it. There's the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episode where they did The Shining. That's a classic. But no, I enjoyed Shawshank before I knew it was a Stephen King thing, and even doing this, like I knew those older movies were related to Stephen King, like It and all those. But then I was like, oh, this kind of reminds me of The Green Mile, because while Andrew was making his jokes, I was making jokes back at him. And then I was like, oh, wait, that is actually a Stephen King adaptation as well.
Same director.
Yes.
Same composer, I just found out, too.
Huh.
Of course.
Yeah.
Same prison.
Yeah. So I'm just a Shawshank guy. Like I haven't like specifically watched Stephen King films because of Shawshank. It always feels like it's the black sheep of all of his adapted works, because it's just so it strikes a chord with everyone. It's not just like specifically supernatural or horror or any of those things. And I was trying to work in the director having written for Dream Warriors. Couldn't figure out how to work in A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warrior to that answer. I'm sorry.
Well, we still have time to work it in. If it maybe it'll come back in another question. An interesting nugget that I found out about this movie when doing some background research for this episode. Apparently, it was not a major flop, but it didn't make its budget back. Part of it was because they didn't have a super bankable star. There was no Tom Cruise. There was no Harrison Ford. No one in 1994 was going out to see the new Tony Robbins movie. That just wasn't what people.
Oh, I did it to you.
And then the other interesting thing with the marketing of this movie is that they didn't it wasn't marketed as a Stephen King adaptation, because Brandon, sort of like similar to what you were saying, a lot of people hear Stephen King and you think it's going to be supernatural. It's going to be like a horror movie. It's going to be scary. So they didn't want to like scare audiences away with that. They were like just going for this is just a straight up drama movie. There's like nothing else to it. There's nothing even remotely supernatural going on. But I just thought that was interesting that like you didn't have a bankable star and you don't want to use Stephen King's name, even though if you do use his name, you have like a ton of people who are like, oh, we should go check that out, even though they would probably not have seen the movie that they thought they were going to see. So I like to consider this movie as an essential piece of dadcore cinema. which is exactly what it sounds like, just movies that dads love. This is one of the best movies about dude bromances of all time. It's, you know, if you're going to tell
like
someone
these
like
movies, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to say, like, it's kind of okay it didn't make a lot of money. Like, some movies just need to be made. You know what I mean? Of course, it's about money, and that's like the point. But it's kind of nice when a movie is made and it like doesn't maybe do all that well at the beginning, but people recognize it for like the work of art that it is. So there is a difference between movies and cinema, and I would definitely consider this like cinema. You know, that's my opinion anyway.
A movie that can be purchased by TNT and then run every Sunday for all of eternity.
Exactly.
25 years.
Yeah. What did you guys think of the bromance element of this movie?
Well, in a lot of ways, it parallels myself and Brant. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, you're not wrong. Well, I mean, I do appreciate, especially now coming back to it. I think it was written by some critics that said it is like the friendship between Red and Andy isn't propelled by like any outside force, like conducting a caper or fast cars or developing a relationship with women. It's just they're two dudes and they're in a similar life situation and they become friends over the good friends.
They certainly have time.
Yes, but yeah, it's interesting to just kind of see that relationship develop over the course of 2 hours and 20 minutes as well, because they do go through these shared traumas of being in Shawshank together, and it's nice that one of them represents hope and the other one is consigned to his fate until Andy kind of turns Red around on that.
That's
hell yeah.
I like that. There was beautiful. Good pacing too. Like, it's a long movie, but it doesn't feel like, you know, some movies you're like, all right, let's go, let's get there. Like, we know it's coming. This one wasn't like that. I felt like it was paced well.
Mm-hmm. Andrew, did you have a particular scene that stuck out to you during this first viewing, which I still can't get over the fact that you hadn't seen this before?
Oh gosh. A particular scene. Let me have a minute to think about that. We can, I don't know if you want to. Yeah.
We can circle back. Brandon, do you have a particular scene that stands out to you? Maybe something that stood out this time, or something that anytime you're watching and it comes up, you're like, oh yeah, this part again.
Well, first off, I just want to say the cinematography in this is gorgeous, and the fact that this didn't make that much money in theaters concerns me, because like you can tell they spent a lot of money to shoot this. Sure. Because like all the wide shots, all the like helicopter shots, there's just like there's so many extras in the prison when they do the wide yard shots, and it's really, it's just a well shot movie, and
shot by the legend Roger Deakins, the goat,
and he knows what he's doing.
Goat cinematographer. Yeah.
And there's multiple scenes where they could have, like, where Andy gets forcefully sodomized by was it Boggs and his crew,
the sisters,
or the sisters, I couldn't remember the name, or
sorry, are we talking about your favorite scene still? I'm confused.
I am I'm getting to it but I'm just those scenes.
Make note of that. We'll pause the podcast. Just everyone write down in their notes, for those keeping score at home, Brandon's favorite scene is Andy being sodomized by the sisters.
Yes.
We're all in agreement.
This is where you take your Tubi ad break, and then we get back to my actual favorite scene. But I'm just setting it up here because or when Boggs himself is getting beaten by Clancy Brown, like they don't show the beatings, like or the gruesome parts, but they'll show like a dynamic motion into what's happening and then the aftermath. And I think for me, the most poignant scene out of all of them is when the kid that that came to what is his name?
Tommy,
the kind of Tommy, the greaser kid, right?
Kid.
Yeah,
the rock and roll guy.
Yeah, he he got his GED, and but like, and he came under Andy's tutelage, and he was like, I had a cellmate when I was doing time somewhere else that was bragging about getting away with murder of essentially he was the murderer that actually murdered Andy's wife and the guy she was cheating on him with. And the warden has him shot 4 times after like confirming that he would like go and testify on Andy's behalf, right, because the warden was corrupt. And just it's in silhouette, and it's just like, it's so powerful, and that scene always sticks out to me every time.
That's a great choice. That's kind of against the grain. There are there are a few big moments in the movie that I feel like most people either agree on or would say are, the moments that really stick with them. But that is a moment that is, it's super, super, super powerful. Andrew, I don't know if you were able to figure out if you had one scene that stuck out to you.
I mean, this is kind of an odd one, maybe a little obscure. When it's clear that like I don't remember exactly the scenario. I think it's after the thing with Boggs, where basically he gets beat by the guards or whatever, and it was like, Andy had sort of earned the not the trust, but sort of like the support of the guards in a way, like where they were going to protect him. And I realized like later it was because he was providing those money laundering services or whatever. But at the same time, it sort of showed that like it sort of humanized him more to the guards and vice versa. Like other than the captain or whatever, like the guards were almost like personable in the movie because of the way that he like challenged the status quo and like actually approached them and offered his services. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Can I guess the one that you thought one of us would say?
Yeah.
The moment where the warden's, when Andy's gone from his cell and the warden's looking around and he's angry and he's throwing the rocks, and then suddenly it goes through the poster on the wall and you see him stick his finger in, and then he rips the poster off the wall into a shot from the hole onto
and
the
warden.
Camera
like pans back.
Yeah,
that's pretty sweet
shot.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have guessed that one. I feel like the two that most people say are the beers on the roof and when Andy's playing the Italian opera for the whole prison to hear. The scene that always sticks with me is Brooks. When Brooks gets out and there's that whole little sequence of him trying to readjust to life, and it ends with Brooks was here. That gets me every time, that seeing that sad little old man not being able to readjust back to life on the outside and like cars being around, like that just that breaks me.
Yeah.
What this movie did, like it was surprising how like they could make you appreciate not being in prison throughout the whole movie. You know what I mean? Like in a very strong way, not like just kind of like, oh, that would kind of suck. It was, and seeing those moments of humanity like made it even that much better.
Yeah. Because it also in a weird way makes you think like, oh, maybe prison wouldn't be so bad because I would make really good pals and we would be friends for the rest of time.
There's a few trials and tribulations you have to get through before that, but yeah. No, but you're right. I mean, I
here a week in the hole there, but otherwise, it seems kind of chill.
But like we so crave the camaraderie. Like I had a similar experience. One of the series I love, the miniseries Band of Brothers from I think like 2001 HBO. Like it almost made you want to be in the war. Like obviously that's ridiculous, but just like that. The camaraderie and like the brotherhood and stuff that's always powerful.
Yeah, the power of dude friendship, of bromances, it can conquer all things. Bromances will give you so much hope that you will climb through miles of shit to then get to a random town on a beach in Mexico somewhere, because you just know that one day your best bud is going to show up on that beach too, and you guys are going to live out the rest of your days there. And that's kind of beautiful. Not even kind of beautiful. It's really beautiful. This movie is,
agreed.
Again, it's like kind of corny, and like it's obviously it's like mainstream for a reason, but I think it is really nice to just sit down and watch something that has a super hopeful message, in it, that we can all sort of step away from and think, yeah, that's rad. Wouldn't it be nice to have friends like that?
It is interesting. I don't think it would work as well if it was like it was set in the 90s. Like Jail was kind of folksy back in the 40s, but like in the 90s, everyone's just like making shivs at everything and stabbing each other.
They had shivs in this movie.
Sure. Like one. I don't know. Like jails were like had much more charm to them back then. Now they're just like these
overcrowded,
low slung concrete buildings. Yeah. Exactly. And unfortunately, some of those old jails are still probably in use, but I just don't think it would have worked as well. It wouldn't have been as good.
No, there would have been a lot more cynicism if this movie were to take place in the 90s or after. There's like, I mean, that's also kind of just, we could get into a deeper conversation. I don't know if we necessarily want to, but just about sort of American ideals of these different periods of time where like the 50s to or the 40s to 60s were seen as times of like much more hope. There was like a lot more excitement for what the future might hold. People could hold on to their beliefs that if they just like stay a person of integrity, that everything will work out for them. Whereas like if you're making a prison movie in the 90s or 2000s, 2010s, that those ideas are just lost. Like it's not really part of our society the same way that it was back then, or at least that we like looked back on it as being.
Right. It's also interesting to think about like when this movie starts, like the war had just ended a few years prior. Imagine being like in prison in the United States during World War II. Like that had to be kind of odd. Just the whole, like you think about the time right after the war, it's like a completely different world than it was in the 90s.
We just won the war. Like everything is opening up and there's so many possibilities. And then like, nope, boom, you're going to jail.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, your wife cheated on you, was murdered, and you're being sent to jail for it.
Well, interestingly, like, I don't know, maybe I've missed part of the opening sequence, but they kind of leave you in question as to whether or not he truly did it until that later part of the movie. Is that right?
Yes.
Like, I thought the movie was about did he do it or didn't he do it? And then once I kind of realized like that's not what this movie's about. But then they made it clear that he didn't do it.
Yeah. How great is that ending?
So good. The 40 minutes of them reuniting on the beach. I've seen it enough times.
Just all of it.
Interestingly, I am a bit of a crier, but not for movies generally, unless there's some sort of animal being like injured or abused or something. Animal movies will get me.
I mean, I was emotional over the fact that like when he got out of the crawling through the 500 yards of fecal matter is always is always a powerful moment in the film for me. And then you see him taking off his shirt and bathing in the creek. I'm not really doing myself any favors with these descriptions of scenes, am I?
So yeah, okay. Wow.
But it's a good moment because it's like him finally escaping and shedding off the being the prison life for his freedom. And then you're just grinning the whole time when the warden gets his just desserts.
And how the warden grossly underestimated this guy. Like he had the plan the whole time.
Mm-hmm. And they, I don't know if this is Stephen King's writing or how well they adapted it to film, but like it's a 2 hour and 20 minute movie it doesn't feel like it slags anywhere. It doesn't feel too slow at any point, but they also set up so many like Chekhov gun type payoffs without you even noticing it until like you've seen it enough times that like this watch through, I'm just like, oh, that's a seed, oh, that's a seed, oh, that's a seed, oh, that's a seed. And like
the posters, right? Like
the posters, the fact that he's like setting up this fall guy for the warden with like his own birth certificate and social security number and all that. What else? The rock hammer is in the Bible that he hands back to Andy.
Yeah, I was wondering where
salvation's inside here. Which is what Andy signs the Bible with. Salvation was inside here. Yeah. So it's all just it's a masterpiece, and I don't often use that word, maybe more so than Andrew, but it's so well constructed.
Unlike the jail, by the way, might I suggest some rebar?
Fair point.
It's really a movie about having a plan, whether it be, a next day plan, a 5-year plan, or a 20-year plan to break out of prison. Just be prepared and have a plan. I think that's the major takeaway from this movie, more than anything else. So, a few more questions before we get into our final words and move on to recommendations. I feel like this is a super quotable movie.
Mm.
So wondering if either of you guys had any quotes that stood out to you.
Oh man.
I mean, there's 3 like real pop culture lines that I noticed. Like I always think of Fresh Fish, which they scream when all the new people come in. And for me, I think the most memorable line is, again, Morgan Freeman doing the voiceover while Andy's crawling through the excrement to freedom, and he's like, 500 yards. That's over 3 football fields or something like that, or almost 3 football fields. It's half a mile. Like he just keeps like expounding on that and makes you think I would not be able to do that myself without. Yeah, no, thank you.
It's like the best metaphor in any movie. Like you see that, and everyone's like, yeah, sometimes life is like crawling through half a mile of shit, but there's hope that you'll come out on the other side a little bit cleaner, and all will be well.
You have to go through the ish to get to the promised land. I don't know.
The wish or something is not a thing. It's not.
Oh, I have one more. Sorry.
Yeah.
The part where
if you take mine, I'll stab you, and then I will go to that jail.
Oh, do you? Well,
no.
Okay, you can go.
No, you can go. I just wanted to make the stabbing joke, but seriously,
I thought you didn't. I thought you didn't have one. Is it that's the beauty of music?
No, actually.
Okay, so I had this discussion with my girlfriend recently. Like, there's this part in Shawshank where Andy's talking about. He's like, "That's the beauty of music," and he's like, "It's in my head and it's in my heart," because he like this was right after he played the opera on the loudspeaker and was put into solitary for 2 weeks or a month or whatever. And I was just like, I love music. I love consuming music. I love listening to music. It's a way to express myself, and like it's a way to interpret the world. And I always assumed that everyone felt that way about music. And I didn't know why I always thought that, but then having watched this movie and listening to Andy say that line, how it's like in your head and in your heart, and like you can't take that away from you. I think this is where I got it from, or one of the many places I got it from as a kid. But I just thought that was interesting that he kind of experiences music in a similar way to which I do, and I appreciated that in the film.
That he's able to express that, and like a lot, if not all of us, have like felt that, but just never really had the words to explain it. But he's able to put words to it. Andrew, do You have one, and you're not going to.
I think mine is probably one of the ones that people cite frequently. When Andy says you can either get busy living or get busy dying. It's really poignant. Like, and it's very true. Like, those of us who are not in prison, like, it's still the same thing, you know. Some of us live in our own self-constructed prisons. Wow, that was deep.
Fuck.
Mind blown.
No, but it's true. No, that one actually that resonated with me for sure.
It's probably the line that's like most quoted from this movie, but it's the most applicable, you know. And it's a daily choice, right? You wake up every day and you can do one of those two things. So take some inspiration from our good friend Andy Dufresne and get busy living. All right, one last question before we jump to just some final words and recommendations. Is this the greatest prison movie of all time?
The 2000s version of The Longest Yard. It was clearly no.
It's a strong.
I haven't seen a lot of. I haven't seen a lot of prison movies. But this is probably my favorite.
We're not really making prison movies anymore.
No,
I mean they weren't really making prison movies at the time, were they?
I mean, you got this in The Green Mile. You got, you got Escape from Alcatraz. You got some.
I don't think it's something like a lot of people talk about. It's a segment of society that we don't talk about a lot, and it's like, what's interesting is like back then they were like crooked because they were doing these crazy side backroom deals, but now it's just like sanctioned crookedness. So they're probably just not looking for any more publicity. That's my guess.
I mean, that's like a whole nother. There can be like a full podcast series about that. I personally don't feel qualified to talk about it.
No.
Yeah, certainly, you're not wrong. There's definitely something there.
I guess there was like The Rock and Con Air, and those would be somewhat prison adjacent, maybe a little bit more fantastical. The Green Mile
like
is good.
Prison Break movie, like genre movies.
Yes, but I think the only thing that I would say gives Shawshank a run for its money would be Cool Hand Luke.
I do have one as well. What about The Great Escape? I mean, I think that's.
I haven't seen either of those.
Needs to be considered. That's the one about the POWs that dig their way out of that like British or those British POWs that dig their way out of the prison. I don't remember. I've never seen it, but I know it's like a classic.
All I remember from Cool Hand Luke is I think that's the one where Paul Newman eats like 100 eggs or something.
Oh God.
It's a Tuesday morning for me.
Yeah. I don't know. That was a good one, but I think Shawshank has one thing that all the other ones don't do as well, and that's that core concept of maintaining and holding on to hope. And it finds a way to not only make you empathize with the prison, like how wrong our prison system is, but also like a lot of people find it as an allegory for their own life when they're trapped in some sort of monotony and are trying to break free. At least that's my understanding. So I think
that's the
it's
right
hard
reading.
For like non-dramas to compete for best movie in any category. Like The Great Escape, I'm reading about it, was kind of like a war adventure story with like an uplifting ending, but it wasn't really like a drama per se. And that was based on a true story, whereas this just came out of someone's brain. And so I don't know. I think it was well crafted, and I would consider it the best.
I think there's a universality to this movie that like not a lot of movies can achieve. This is a movie where 95% of people sit down and watch it and they're like, yeah, I get what's going on. I totally identify with Andy. Dufresne and, some of what he's going through, while it's not directly exactly like what's going on in my life, I can connect to it in some way. And I think that's why this movie is so beloved. Like, it's really efficient at connecting with like the widest audience possible while still being a phenomenal, movie. So
right. And it's a prison movie, but it's not really a prison movie.
No, it's so much more.
If you think about it.
Well, gents, any final words, any closing arguments for Shawshank and why it should be a movie that that is in the canon? It obviously it's here, so we're not going to remove it, but just if you have any final arguments for why it deserves its place within the canon. And Andrew, our first time viewer, we'll kick it to you first for this one.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I would say if you've been living under a rock for the last 35 years and you're looking for a great movie to watch, I would suggest this movie. Yeah, I think it should forever be etched in the the pop culture ethos. It's that good.
Brandon, what do you have for it? Any final words?
This is the first film to feature Morgan Freeman narration. It's certainly not the last, but you can see why he was picked to do like March of the Penguins and any further. You could see why he was picked to be God in the Bruce Almighty franchise. Like he has such composure and a great delivery and line reads and everything in this. And Tim Robbins does a great job at being just the sad puppy dog eyes or the vacant killer stare. And there's so many like good actors who you have no idea who they are, but they are in everything that you've watched in this. There's so much to praise about this. We didn't even get to who was it? The one of the other guys in the gang, or the prison friend group, William Sadler as Haywood. Great performance.
Oh yeah, that guy's great.
The stutter, like you hate him but love him at the same time. Everyone is just so good in this film, and like I said already, beautifully shot, so well written, and they even get in multiple poop jokes in a serious drama. So what do I have to say? My final thoughts on this is I'll see you in Zihuatanejo.
I love it. And we love a good poop joke. Who doesn't like a poop joke?
More to come on that.
Sweet.
In the recommendation.
I heard it.
No, there is another joke.
There's a there's a poop connection. And we started by talking about how the first time I was on your guys' show was to talk about the South Park Christmas episode with Mr. Hanky, which feels extremely on brand for me to come on your show and talk about shit. So recommendations. Let's seamlessly transition to the recommendation section of the episode. Okay. It's my favorite portion of the episode. It's a ton of fun. Brandon and Andrew, you guys already know the rules. If we have any new listeners out there, we'll quickly run through them. So for each movie that we induct into the canon, we will also suggest 3 things that you should check out if you like said movie. So at least one of those things has to be another movie. The only thing that we ask is that we don't recommend another movie that is already in the canon. The other 2 things, they can also be movies, but they can be anything else in the world. It could be an album, a band, a book, a comic book, a TV show, a single episode of a television series, a restaurant, we like to get really weird with it. We like to get super creative, and the connections can be as obvious or as loose as possible. So with all that being said, we can jump in and I think we'll go in alphabetical order. So we'll go Andrew, Brandon, Raph, and we'll each give a brief overview of why you're recommending it, and then we'll kick it over to the next person and take it from there. So Andrew, the floor is yours whenever you're ready for your first recommendation.
Okay. Well, obviously, I have to go with Family Guy, Season 7, Episode 15, titled Three Kings. They do parodies or short stories, Stand By Me, Misery, and, of course, The Shawshank Redemption. And the one thing I like about Family Guy is they keep pretty true to it, and they keep the stuff in there but they kind of like tweak it a little bit to make it funny. And there's one scene where I think they're like, why Andrew Dufresne chose to break out on Burrito Night, we'll never know, or something like that. And like the poster is some sort of, I don't remember which like celebrity it is, but it's some sort of like effeminate 70s celebrity.
It's Donny Osmond. A man.
Yeah, and it like he throws the rock right at the butt area, so then he keeps putting his finger. It's just really funny. But like what I found most interesting about that show, by the way, is that like some of the lines they used, I thought they made up, but they're like lines actually from the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Although tweaked for comedy, but it's a fun watch. I would suggest it.
I love it. It's a great first pick. I can't believe your first interaction with Shawshank was through Family Guy, and not
that's just
the
wrong.
Actual movie. There's
this one joke they do in a different episode where Brian has worms, and I think just Stewie says something like, "I can see them Shawshanking their way out of your balloon knot" or something. And lastly, I propose there's probably a pornography title called The Shawshank Redemption, and that is the end of the jokes, everybody.
All right, before we get ourselves in trouble, Brandon, what's your first recommendation?
My first recommendation, I'm going to go with Mystic River, a 2003 movie directed by Clint Eastwood, starring Tim Robbins, Sean Penn, and Kevin Bacon, and I think Lawrence Fishburne was in that as well. And I recommend it because if you like this movie and you like Tim Robbins playing a tall, awkward, sad sack that's glaring and also like a little creepy, then this is another Tim Robbins performance for you.
Yeah. I wanted to add another thing to the list of connections between Andy Dufresne and that Tim Robbins character, but I don't want to do it because it might give away too much of the movie.
Yes.
But I think you know what I'm talking about.
I mean, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I think I know what you're talking about as well. Yeah. And if you know, listener, send us a tweet at either at Namely90s or at Raph. What's your Instagram handle?
At Raph Stitt.
Or X handle.
Oh, I don't like X. I don't like to acknowledge the
me
existence of that guy.
It'll be gone by the time this comes out.
By the way, Elon Musk sounds like a men's fragrance. I just want to say that.
Oh no, you said his name. I'm gonna have to bleep that out. Unfortunately,
that summons him.
Oh yeah, it
don't
does.
say his name 3 times in the mirror.
He comes out of your VCR and
he does a 30-minute stand-up special of just like the worst jokes ever. If you summon him,
and your VCR turns into a DVD RX.
No, it turns into a laser disc. That's what it does.
Spelled with an X.
That may or may not at some point take you to Mars, but we're working on it.
Sorry, we're derailing you.
That's fine. We love a good derailment here. All right. So for my first recommendation, pick sounds like we're doing the NBA draft, which we're not drafting. We're just recommending stuff. So my first recommendation is going to be an experience, I'll say. So obviously Shawshank is a great prison movie. The most famous prison in the US is, of course, Alcatraz. If you're ever in the San Francisco area, you got to do the Alcatraz guided tour because it kicks ass. It's so cool. I did it for the first time earlier this year, and I absolutely loved it. It's just a cool, weird piece of history. So if you like prison movies or like are interested in prison content, that's like the prison tour to do. And you have to do the guided tour with the headphones and everything because there's a lot of information and it's all good stuff. Have either of you guys done that tour?
I did when I was probably around the time that I first watched this movie and The Rock. So I was super hyped to do it. So because it was like, oh, it feels like I'm in Shawshank, but it also feels like I'm in that one movie where they capture us and hold us for hostage on Alcatraz.
To your left, you'll see a small room with bars. And to your right, you'll see a small room with bars. I did watch the episode of Mythbusters where they build their own raft out of like period appropriate rain jackets and like row away from Alcatraz to the shore. That's a pretty cool episode. That's not a recommendation. That's just an anecdote.
No, that's a recommendation. Everyone should do that. Everyone should build a raft with with period specific raincoats and see if you can paddle your way from Alcatraz on a very foggy night.
Yeah,
back to the city of San Francisco. It's a ton of fun. If you haven't done it yet, what are you doing? You're missing out. Andrew, back to you. What's your second recommendation?
Tony Robbins business coaching. No, I'm just kidding. That man's head is
across the coals
really large. Who could forget the Prison Break TV series which was on Fox some time ago, which is where like as I like to call him, J.G. Wentworth Miller and the other guy break out of jail for like the first 2 seasons and then repeatedly break into and back out of jail for the rest of the series.
Yeah, Dominic, not Moynihan,
Dominic
Purcell.
Yeah. Does anyone know?
He got married to Bill Ray Cyrus's ex recently.
Raph, are you familiar? If I say J.G. Wentworth Miller, do you understand that joke, or is that a regional
Wentworth, thing? 877.
No, I know J.G. Wentworth.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was regional. I just thought about it.
No, that's like anyone who's ever been not unemployed, but anyone who has ever had the pleasure of watching daytime television. It like should be.
It's my money, and I need it now.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely playing to people who are like probably out of work. It's definitely the demo that they're going for, and why the commercials only play between the hours of like 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. But yeah, that's nationwide, baby.
Okay,
sweet. Brandon, what's your second recommendation?
So there's a video game for the PlayStation 4, and I think it's on Steam as well. And it's called A Way Out. It's a cooperative action adventure video game, like couch co-op. You have to play with someone next to you. They also did a more recent one called It Takes Two, but this one is specifically about two bros in jail. They escape jail. There's a lot of twists and turns in the story, plot wise, that I thought, while not Stephen King level, not Shawshank level twists, it's enough to get down to it's more of a Point Break style, Fast and the Furious style bromance, but the connections were in my head. So I was like, if you want to escape from prison, there may or may not be some references to Shawshank in this one. It's kind of like you're two convicted prisoners who must break out of prison and stay on the run from authorities. And it's kind of fun to be forced to do couch co-op and play with someone next to you so that you can undergo the stresses of having to play a video game with someone right next to you, like you had to do back in the 90s. And that's how I brought it back to both Shawshank and our podcast.
I love it. It all comes full circle. I also like that both of your guys' second recommendations were about bros breaking out of prison. Because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. Just breaking out of prison with your bros.
Yeah. We could all just get arrested right now and break out of prison.
I feel like you guys would break each other out, and then I would just be like left to my own devices. I feel like I would be like the Brooks of the crew.
Oh no!
Ouch!
We wouldn't leave you hanging.
I appreciate
no.
Too soon.
I don't think that. Oh boy.
Was that cut out of the TNT version broadcast?
Dial 988.
I don't think so. I think it's in. So my second recommendation is not about two bros breaking out of prison, but it is another movie directed by Frank Darabont, who this was actually, I don't think we talked about this, but this was his like directorial debut. This was his first major picture that he directed, which is like a pretty insane first movie.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
But then after that, he sort of found a lane for himself as being the guy who does Stephen King adaptations. So I'm going to recommend another one of his flicks. One of my favorite Stephen King adaptations, a movie that I will always recommend if I get the chance to. It is, actually, it does lean into that supernatural horror sort of element, but I'm going to recommend The Mist from 2004. I want to say, but I don't know if either of you guys have seen it, but 2007, a very fun, little spooky movie also from Mr. Frank Darabont. So cool.
What's the Stephen King movie where all the things all the machines come to life? It's not Killdozer. That's like a bad 1970s movie. Isn't there one like that?
Was that Stephen King? You're talking about the one with Donald Sutherland, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, aren't you?
I don't know.
No.
Whatever.
Is that your recommendation?
Is that your
Maximum Overdrive?
It was just a question.
Maximum Overdrive is a Stephen King. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That and the dog one, Cujo.
Are these?
That's
all
why I got into my profession. No. Anyway, sorry. I'm on to my next recommendation. I'll stop.
Final recommendation.
Movies.
I think I have to say The Green Mile. Right. Similar story, same composer. I haven't actually seen it, but now I feel like I have to. And I like Tom Hanks, so that's got to happen sometime soon.
As well.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah, so I think that's you gotta. If you haven't watched that, you gotta. And I will.
I've never seen it, but that's a great pick.
Wait, really?
I also like the self recommendation. It's rare.
Yeah. Have you? Andrew, you've seen it though, right?
No, I said I have not seen it, but you have to, and so I will. That's my point.
I gave you two choices. Yes. All right.
I think you're the first person to recommend something that they've not seen.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I like Tom Hanks a lot.
ER with
go watch Clancy Brown and Paul McCrane on screen again. No, I just like it's. I really like Tom Hanks, and I like this director apparently, and I like this composer. So, because I really like the music in movies, like that really speaks to me. Mm-hmm. So I like a good score. So I feel like, and it's also one of those kind of classic movies that people love. So those of us who have not seen it will all go see it together separately in our homes.
Plus Michael Clark Duncan's in it, Bonnie Hunt. Anyway, since we've done all of Darabont's excellent Stephen King adaptations. Clearly, I should do A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors, because that's the best of the franchise. Don't at me. But no, that's not what I'm doing. I am doing another pick based off of Frank Darabont. The first season and a half of The Walking Dead, he was an EP. And he wrote episode 4, I think. And I wanted to say he directed some of those early episodes, because let me confirm that.
That's sweet. That's a good pick. I think you're the second person to recommend that show.
Just the first 2 seasons. I've only watched up to 4, and there's at least 10 and 5 spin-offs. But yeah,
I think I dropped after season 3 or midway through season 3.
He wrote the first episode, the second episode, and he directed the first episode. So he directed the pilot, which is, you can, like, now that I know that, you can kind of see the similarities from Shawshank in how he shot that first episode, which was so good. And there was so much potential, and they've really milked the series dry at this point. But Walking
Is it
Dead.
the second season where they go to the prison, or is that season 3 or 4?
I think it might be 3. Second season's on the farm, if I remember correctly.
Yes. So the last time that this show was recommended, I did my impression of Rick from The Walking Dead, so I feel like I'm obligated to do it again. It's a very quick impression, but Carl, we need to get supplies.
That's fantastic.
End of scene. That's it.
Spot on.
The show is like 3 seasons of that. Every episode is him whispering at his son that they need to get more supplies.
So I'm not familiar with this program.
You should watch it. It was recommended. Really? At least the first 2 seasons.
I know what it is.
Okay. It's a comic book adaptation. Of course you haven't seen it.
All right, sweet. I like that pick. I also didn't know the Frank Darabont connection. So that is that's really cool. I probably won't go back and rewatch it, but if I were, that would be a cool thing to see like the connections between that and Shawshank. So for my final recommendation, I'm going to go with another great movie about a great bromance, a movie that also came out in 1994. Kind of a different vibe from Shawshank, but a great movie nonetheless. I'm going with Dumb and Dumber.
Ooh.
Great bromance. Right. Yeah. Our pets' heads are falling off. You know, the whole 9. Sweet. Well, that was recommendations. Before we say our final goodbyes, let's just do one last spin through of what we recommended for the folks listening at home, and we'll go same order. Andrew, what do you got?
Family Guy, season 7, episode 15, Three Kings.
Mystic River.
All 3. Oh, all 3. I'm sorry.
That's on me. That's on me.
Closely by Prison Break, starring J.G. Wentworth Miller, as I like to call him, and then finally The Green Mile, which I can wholeheartedly recommend, though I have not seen.
I said Mystic River, the video game A Way Out, and the first season and a half of The Walking Dead, or specifically the pilot episode of The Walking Dead.
Awesome. I've got the Alcatraz guided tour, Frank Darabont's The Mist, and Dumb and Dumber, the great 1994 bromance comedy. Brandon, Andrew, thank you guys again so much for joining me. This has been an absolute pleasure. It's been a ton of fun. Yes. We had some good laughs, some good insight. Screenagers, we are, as we said at the top of the episode, this is our last episode of season 2, our last episode of 2023. I and the rest of the Screenage Wasteland team, we sincerely hope that you have enjoyed going on this journey with us so far of great movies that are all in the canon, all essential movies. Where, like I said, we're coming back in 2024. We've got more great movies, more great episodes, more great guests like Andrew and Brandon. I hope that that you guys will agree to come back on and, you know, hopefully speak about another 90s classic, maybe one that you both have already seen, but who knows? We'll get to that when we get to that. Before we get out of here, if you guys want to plug the show one last time and let folks know where they can find it.
Yeah. You can find us every Monday on your podcasting platform of choice, namely 90s.com/listen is probably the easiest way to find those things. We're also on YouTube every Monday at youtube.com/@namely90s, and primarily Instagram at namely90s as well.
With the 90S.
With a 90S. And I have to say thank you. My battery may die any minute, so it was a pleasure. Thank you for having us on.
Yeah, thanks.
Perfect timing. Yeah, thanks again for joining, listeners. Thanks for going on this journey with us. And until the new year, stay safe, stay awesome, and we'll see you in the wasteland.